On November 18, 1978, over 900 people lined up to drink cyanide-laced punch. They weren't hostages. They weren't forced at gunpoint. Many of them smiled as they swallowed poison. Mothers fed it to their children first, then drank it themselves. This is the largest mass suicide in modern history. And it happened because one man convinced nearly 1,000 people that death was freedom. His name was Jim Jones, and the psychological manipulation he used didn't die in that jungle. Mind control mass psychosis. The techniques he perfected are still being used today, in cults, in politics, in movements you might not even recognize. This is the story of how ordinary people lost their ability to think for themselves, and how the most dangerous prison is one built inside your own mind. The Preacher's Rise. James Warren Jones was born in 1931 in rural Indiana into poverty and dysfunction. His father was a suspected Klan member. His mother worked constantly, leaving young Jim alone. And in that loneliness, he found something peculiar: power over others. As a child, he held mock funerals for dead animals. He practiced preaching to neighborhood kids. He studied how to hold attention, how to create emotion, how to make people believe. By his 20s, Jim Jones had founded his own church, the People's Temple. I represent divine principle. I am the manifestation of God on earth. He preached racial equality at a time when America was deeply segregated. He welcomed black members when white churches turned them away. He fed the hungry. He housed the homeless. To his followers, he wasn't just a preacher. He was a prophet, a savior, the one person who truly understood them. Prophet, savior, truth. And that's exactly what he wanted them to believe. But something darker was growing beneath the surface. The isolation begins. As the People's Temple grew, so did Jim Jones's paranoia. He claimed the government was watching him, that enemies surrounded the church, that only he could protect his flock from the evil outside world, and his followers believed him, because he had created something powerful, a closed information environment. Members were encouraged to cut ties with non-believing family. Newspapers were forbidden. Television was controlled. The only source of truth was Jim Jones himself. Information became a weapon of control. In 1974, Jones moved nearly 1,000 followers to the jungles of Guyana, South America. He called it JONESTOWN, a socialist paradise free from American persecution. In reality, it was a prison without walls. Armed guards patrolled the perimeter. Passports were confiscated. Members worked 16-hour days in brutal heat. And every night, Jones's voice crackled through loudspeakers, reminding them that the outside world wanted them dead. This level of control seems impossible to accept. Hit like and subscribe because we're just getting started. The psychology behind this goes even deeper. Manufacturing enemies. Every cult needs an enemy, and Jim Jones manufactured them brilliantly. The CIA was coming. The FBI had infiltrated the church. Racist politicians wanted to destroy their interracial utopia. Nuclear war was imminent. Enemies everywhere, trust no one. These weren't just lies. They were carefully constructed realities that made the outside world terrifying and the inside world safe. Psychologists call this us versus them thinking, and it's one of the most powerful tools of manipulation. When you believe everyone outside your group wants to destroy you, you'll do anything to stay inside. Jones conducted loyalty tests. He made members sign false confessions to crimes they never committed. He held public punishment sessions, where followers were beaten for minor infractions while others watched. Fear became the glue that held Jonestown together. Not love, not faith, fear. And the tragedy is that many members genuinely believed they had found family, purpose, meaning. They had given up everything for this community. Admitting it was all a lie meant admitting they had wasted their lives, so they kept believing. The White Knights. Jim Jones didn't introduce death suddenly. He normalized it gradually through what he called White Knights. These were emergency drills, usually at 3 or 4 in the morning. Sirens would blare. Members would be dragged from their beds and assembled in the pavilion. Jones would announce that enemies had surrounded the compound, that the end was near, that the only dignified choice was revolutionary suicide. Then he would have everyone drink from a vat of liquid. We will die together. If we cannot live in peace, we will die in peace. The liquid was harmless, a test, but members didn't know that. They drank believing it was poison and waited to die. When they survived, Jones would congratulate them on their loyalty. You have proven your commitment to the cause. These rehearsals served a sinister purpose. They desensitized members to the concept of mass death. They tested who would comply and who might resist. And they reinforced the idea that death was not an ending but a transcendence. By November 1978, the people of Jonestown had practiced dying dozens of times. Congressman's visit. The outside world hadn't completely forgotten Jonestown. Concerned relatives had been writing letters to politicians for years. They called themselves the Concerned Relatives. And in November 1978, they convinced Congressman Leo Ryan to visit Guyana and investigate. Investigation, truth, danger. When Ryan arrived at Jonestown, Jones put on a show. A band played. Members smiled and danced. They told Ryan how happy they were, how free they felt, how Jones had saved their lives. But then quietly something shifted. A few members slipped notes to Ryan's delegation. They wanted to leave. They were being held against their will. Ryan announced he would take anyone who wanted to go back to America. 16 people stepped forward. Jones's mask began to crack. As the defectors and Ryan's group headed to the airstrip, Jones knew it was over. If those people talked, investigations would follow. The truth would come out. The world would see Jonestown for what it really was. And so Jim Jones made his final decision. The one he had been preparing for all along. The airstrip massacre. On November 18, 1978, at the Port Kaiduma airstrip, armed People's Temple members opened fire on Congressman Ryan and his delegation. Ryan was killed. 3 journalists were killed. A defecting Temple member was killed. 5 dead. 11 wounded. Ambush. The survivors crawled into the jungle and hid overnight, terrified the attackers would return. Meanwhile, back at Jonestown, Jim Jones gathered his followers for the final time. His voice echoed through the loudspeakers, calm and measured, as if discussing the weather. He explained that Congressman Ryan was dead, that soldiers would come now, that they would torture the children, separate families, destroy everything they had built. We didn't commit suicide. We committed an act of revolutionary suicide, protesting the conditions of an inhumane world. The only choice, he said, was to die with dignity, to go out together as a family, making a statement the world would never forget. And then the vats of poison were brought forward. The final hour. The poison was mixed with grape-flavored punch. Flavor aid, not Kool-Aid as popular culture would later claim. It contained cyanide, chloral hydrate, and sedatives. Children were given the poison first. Mothers fed it to their babies with syringes. The audio tape that recorded the final hour of Jonestown is one of the most disturbing documents in human history. You can hear Jones speaking continuously, reassuring his followers. You can hear people crying. You can hear a woman named Christine Miller arguing with Jones, begging him to consider alternatives. She was shouted down by other members. Obey, trust, die together. For 45 minutes, people lined up and drank. Some were injected when they resisted. Armed guards surrounded the pavilion, shooting anyone who tried to flee. By the end, over 900 people lay dead in the Guyanese jungle. Jim Jones himself died from a gunshot wound to the head, likely self-inflicted. The largest mass suicide in modern history was complete. But here's the question that haunts historians to this day. Why they drank? How could intelligent, caring people drink poison and feed it to their own children? This is the question that makes Jonestown so terrifying. Because the victims weren't stupid. They weren't weak. Many were college-educated idealists who genuinely wanted to change the world. The answer lies in the psychology of totalist control. Jim Jones didn't ask for total obedience on day one. He asked for small commitments first. Join our church. Donate some money. Move a little closer to other members. Cut ties with negative people. Each step seemed reasonable. Each step led to the next. By the time members realized how deep they were, leaving felt impossible. They had given up jobs, homes, families, savings. Their entire identity was wrapped up in the people's temple. Once you've invested so much, your mind will do anything to protect that investment. This is called the sunk cost fallacy, and it traps people in bad relationships, bad investments, and yes, even cults. Admitting you were wrong feels worse than staying wrong. The patterns remain. Here's what makes Jonestown relevant today. The techniques Jim Jones used didn't die with him. They are still being used right now. Closed information environments. Social media algorithms show us only what we already believe. Manufactured enemies. Political movements thrive on us versus them thinking. Isolation from non-believers. Online communities encourage cutting ties with people who disagree. Gradual escalation of commitment. From liking a post to donating money to defining your entire identity around a cause. Algorithm echo chamber control. The psychologist Robert Lifton, who studied Jonestown extensively, identified 8 criteria of thought reform. They appear in cults. They appear in authoritarian regimes. And disturbingly, they appear in movements that seem completely mainstream. The question isn't whether you could be manipulated. The question is whether you already are. Because the most effective manipulation never feels like manipulation. It feels like truth. It feels like belonging. It feels like finally being understood. The only defense. So how do you protect yourself from becoming a victim of mass psychosis? The answer is uncomfortable. You have to stay uncomfortable. Doubt. The people of Jonestown stopped questioning. They stopped seeking outside perspectives. They stopped entertaining the possibility that they might be wrong. And in that certainty, they became vulnerable to the most extreme manipulation imaginable. 1. Seek out information that challenges your beliefs. 2. Maintain relationships outside your primary group. 3. Be suspicious of leaders who claim special knowledge. 4. Notice when fear is being used to control you. 5. Remember that healthy groups welcome questions. The survivors of Jonestown, the ones who escaped before the final day, all share one thing in common. They maintained a thread of doubt. They never fully surrendered their capacity to question. The moment you stop questioning is the moment you become controllable. Jim Jones didn't create monsters. He created believers, and believing without questioning is the most dangerous thing a human being can do. 918 people died at Jonestown. Men, women, and 304 children who never had a choice. Remember their names. They weren't crazy. They weren't evil. They were human beings searching for meaning, community, and purpose. And they found a man who promised all 3, then led them to their deaths. The real horror of Jonestown isn't the poison. It's how ordinary the path to that poison was. Small surrenders of judgment, gradual isolation from outside voices, an enemy that justified any action, a leader who positioned himself as the only source of truth. These patterns exist everywhere if you know how to see them. So the next time you find yourself in a group where questions aren't welcome, where outsiders are demonized, where one person claims to have all the answers, remember Jonestown. Remember what happens when thinking becomes optional. If you made it this far, comment "I question everything" to prove you understand the lesson of Jonestown. The truth is never comfortable, but it's always worth knowing. History has more to teach us. Subscribe if you want to learn.